Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video we're going to be going over FORGEWEAVER ARAZ on Mythic difficulty, discussing changes to the fight moving up from Heroic, WeakAuras, and other prep that you can do before you actually get into the encounter itself, and just other tips and tricks that we learned over the course of our progression to help you and your guild get this boss down. I'll also be putting out similar mythic guides for the rest of Manaforge Omega as well as beyond into the Midnight expansion. So make sure you do subscribe to the channel, and also note that I am going to kind of assume you have some base knowledge of the fight on lower difficulties just to save some time. Otherwise, let's jump right into it, talking about exactly what is different on mythic difficulty. So the big thing right off the top is related to the ads that spawn these arcane manifestations. They always spawn with this power manifested buff, making it deal 0 damage to them when you hit them, and also giving them a massive move speed increase on top of the fact that they just generally move faster on this difficulty. In order to remove it, you need to actually have them pushed or path through one of the void tears that spawn, and these always spawn diagonally across from collectors, which I'll show you in a minute here. But basically, whenever a collector is active, you know the void tear is in a static position diagonally across from it, and you can position towards it. The main strategy here is to use knockbacks to push these ads into these void tears, but potentially a lower coordination strategy would also work, where you actually drop these ads behind void tears so they have to walk through them, because of course they do still try and path to the arcane collectors. That's like the main boss phase change for the repeated phase ones. The intermission also has a pretty important change here, where the actual collectors will do containment breach if they're not destroyed within 10 seconds of each other. So it's essentially a 10-second cast once one is killed, and if not all of them are killed within that 10 seconds, it is a wipe. So you have to split your damage here evenly, as opposed to just always focusing the one that gains energy first. It also has the side effect of meaning the tanks need to make sure they are on top of blocking arcane convergences, which again we'll cover in the intermission section. Finally, in the last phase of the fight, there's a new ability in Death Throes, which is just another knockback attack. So you need to be careful here. That pull-in effect is happening in this phase as well. And if you get pulled to the wrong side of the boss and then get knocked, it can really be bad news. So another ability to be aware of. Now, for these abilities, we do use some WeakAuras for prep. So here's the Northern Sky WeakAura. My guild actually uses the liquid one, but the Northern Sky one is free. It's available to use right now, whereas the liquid one is paywalled, and it has very similar functionality. So scrolling down to FORGEWEAVER here, you can always see all the different bosses. It kind of explains the syntax and how to set up MRT notes and whatnot. So first is assigning CCs to deal with these ads. Like I said, they're going to be significantly faster than previous difficulties. You also need a knockback in order to actually get them into the void tears, as we were discussing. They've also put a lot of oppressing roar assignments here. I would say post the week 1 nerf of this boss, oppressing roars are kind of irrelevant, and they just add, you know, more ability presses, more coordination. I would say just don't bother with oppressing roars to expand CCs. In general, what you want here is your knockback, as well as a stun, as well as a lockdown ability. And that's like things like Binding Shot, things like Champion Spear, things like Ursul's Vortex, Ring of Peace, those kind of things, just to ensure any stragglers or the pack in general stays as stacked as possible underneath the boss for as long as possible. Another ability that's actually super valuable that a lot of the top end guilds are using is Piercing Howl from Warriors, because it's a 30-second CD, which means it lines up with almost every ad set. There are some that it doesn't work for, but it's one of the largest slows, lasts a super long time. It's 70% slow, so you can use that on most ad sets as well, in combination with all this other assigned CC. Their Arcane Obliteration is the soak ability, so you need to split up into 2 different groups, sometimes 3. I believe 2 is enough. It does note here, right, the timing wise, you can have everyone soaking this last soak because no one has a debuff. But the second soak in particular, we opted to put a lot of immune players specifically. I think we had literally only 6 players or something in that soak along with the tank, so it's a bigger hit. So we had to make sure we had stronger raid cooldowns assigned to that soak specifically to deal with the raid damage. And the reason for that is there's a couple ad sets going on at the same time, and we wanted to minimize players that were away from the boss in order to maximize uptime, dealing with those ads, dealing with that positioning movement, etc. So that's something to note, but you can just evenly split it up. Again, Northern Skies example is here. I'll show you our example in a second. Last thing is the Arcane Collectors. Like I said, you have to kill them evenly, and so having an even spread of players is pretty important. Here's an image of what our spread was. You can see we kind of clustered the melee together along with the melee healer. Makes this one easier to heal, and in general, they are just an easier time for melee to dodge it. Cluster some of the line attacks over in this direction a little bit more compared to these other two collectors where there's some less players. Obviously, multi-daughters are kind of positioned between collectors to allow them to cleave both. I think mages do quite a bit of damage to these collectors in this phase. It just kind of depends. Make sure your damage is essentially distributed, as well as your healers, because we are 3 healing this boss fight right now. Again, with more gear, with the DPS check, if there's any more health nerfs, you could potentially move to a 4 heal just to make the intermission specifically safer, because this is where you'd likely lose people as the damage does ramp up over time. But on our kill, we did 3 heal it. Again, I can show you my note as well in game real quick, just to give you an example of like what our soak groups look like. You can see we had much more people in the first soak than in the second soak, and the second soak is all players that have some sort of immunity to prevent that healing reduction, since it's also a big hit at the same time, since there are less soakers. And then we also have examples of CC sets, and I will say our CC sets were certainly overkilled on almost every single set. We had like one more ability than we needed to. You'll also notice it's spell IDs here. I think the Northern Sky one does require spell IDs for anything that they don't specifically have named, so just be aware of that. Sometimes it will not work if he doesn't have the name input in the actual WeakAuras itself, so you need to actually find the spell IDs to have everything worked out. And then it's basically just each set we go down with the CCs we have assigned. And like I said, as long as you have a knock, a stun, and the lockdown ability, it's like pretty much all you really need. Even the slows are kind of not super needed. It's just nice if you have a piercing howl, you can throw it on almost every set, so might as well. But you definitely don't need to do as much CC as we did, and as some of the top end guilds like the Racer World First guilds put a ton of CC on these ads because they had way more HP. So it's not nearly as much CC required now. Let's hop into our actual kill of the fight. And again, all these links are going to be in the description below if you guys do want to check them out for yourself here. So on pull, we just kind of keep the boss where he is positioned, and we wait to see which collector gets selected first, because this, of course, is random. So there is some adjustments to your positioning throughout the actual phase here, as well as the intermission, depending on this collector choices. So we're now seeing this collector gets picked first, so we know automatically where the void tears are, because they are in static positions near these markers. These markers are actually our pixel stack points for the manifestation ads, because we want to knock them into the void tears. So the void tears are just in front of these 3 markers here. So I know it's this one. It's always going to be a void tear at triangle. And you're going to see the first position here, and I'm going to talk about it for a bit, because this is probably going to be what wipes you the most often during progression, is dealing with these ads. And there's a few things to keep in mind. First off, you want to be as pixel stacked as possible if you are one of the people with the ad debuff spawning. There's no AoE damage associated with this, so you can just stand directly, positioning wise, in the middle of this circle. I try and put the boss like on top of the spot we want them to stack on, just for ease. So that is something tanks can do as well. Try and position the boss in the middle, right on the edge of the void tear. So you're going to see they're going to come up together. Boom, 1 stack. Honestly, this could even be better stacked. We had one over to the side, but it's totally fine. In this case, it gets a little scary. The binding is on the edge here just to immediately have uptime on these ads. The knockback goes out, and that's the other thing that's important. The angle you knock back from is important. You also want to line up in a straight line with where the drop is. Part of why the boss being positioned correctly is useful, because if you're off slightly, you can send one of these manifestations or 2 of these manifestations just off to the sides, like diagonally, and that can cause them to miss this void tear entirely and not actually lose their buff. It can also be useful to have backup knockbacks and even Death Knight grips ready in case there is a miss. You can quickly correct it, because you can use a second knock or a grip or something like that to, like, if it gets knocked over here, for example, our Death Knight could run over here and do a quick grip through the Void Tear, and that would clear the debuff and save a wipe. So having backups assigned is certainly useful. Having a DK as a backup especially is quite useful. The other thing to talk about here is the overlap of the silence circles and the manifestation drops. It does not happen every single time. However, there are overlaps where the silences go out just before the add debuffs go out, and you are able to get targeted by both debuffs. So a couple important things when that happens. One, anyone with a silence debuff needs to get away of this whole area. This whole area here is a no zone. You are not allowed to be there if you get targeted by the silence debuff, so you need to get out immediately. Second, if you have the add debuff and the silence debuff, generally you want to play like around the sides of the Void Tear here or here. Let your silence debuffs go out. That will expire, and then you can quickly run into the pixel stack. So position close, but not too close that you are clustering this area with circles, essentially. That's, again, something that's going to cause wipes. Similarly, the knockback player can get silences, so they need to do a similar thing where they are positioning away from the stack, but close enough that they can get into position to do their knockback quickly. Now, for the rest of this phase, the boss movement does kind of follow these Void Tears, so it is similarly based to where collectors spawn. The first soak here is going out. Like I said, this is just a non-immune soakers. We do still have raid cooldowns assigned to deal with them. Like we have a rally going on that. We have Spirit Link going down on the soakers because it's a massive healing absorb. It does take a while to heal through. And we are hard swapping to this Echo once we've killed that first set of ads. And the goal here is to kill this guy by the second set of ads going out. This is also going to lead to a double collector. And then basically the double and triple collectors where you have a lot of dodging is very important to have either immune classes who aren't part of the soak, but obviously we have immune players soaking, or tanks if possible, eating up any of these orbs going directly through the boss's hitbox, because that's the hardest one to see, and it protects all the ranged and the melee in this area. So you're going to see I'm kind of playing goalie here. I'm watching behind me. Anything that goes nearly through the boss, I will step into and soak. Only one that time, so not a ton, but you will see that's a common pattern whenever something like that does happen, where we're near a collector during them actually shooting out those orbs. I will try and soak close, and sometimes my co-tank, when you're going to see later on when he's with the Echo, will do a similar thing as well. So we're going to now head towards our next Void Tear. We saw, again, this collector got activated. It was possible, by the way, it's not static. This one was activated, and so was the one to our left. It could have been either of these spawns for this first Void Tear. So again, you are a bit on your toes in terms of the boss movement, but the main thing is to always try and line the boss up with the center if possible. Here's the second tank soak here. We're going to our immune soaks because we don't want everyone to have to run off the boss here. And now you're going to see my co-tank is going to go off, and he's going to go play with the Echo in the corner. Essentially, this is done to optimize boss damage. One, none of the people who are doing the cleave damage on the manifestations need to swap off. They can continue cleaving off of the boss onto these ads. But two, it also gives a little bit of funnel to like your multi-daughters or your cleave target, like Destro Lock, Shadow Priest, that kind of thing. Right? They're getting a benefit from that mob being off in the corner as opposed to getting killed ASAP. Now, you do want to kill it at some point. You are on a little bit of a timer here. There's a pretty large time between the second and the third, which is why we have to kill the first one, because those happen very quickly, as you see in the video. But the second and the third have a pretty long timer between them. It's like, you know, almost 2 minutes, I want to say. And so we're just going to keep that one alive with the goal of killing it before or around the burn at the end of the first intermission. And then similarly, the third one is the last one of the fight. And so we keep that one around as well until shortly into phase 2, or again at the end of the intermission going into phase 2, around that time thereabouts. But if there is ever a nerf to Echo health, or even as the raid buff gets stronger, as we get more gear, I can see you just dropping the Echo in the same spot, swapping to it, killing it ASAP, like we did with the first one, just because it just gets it out of the fight. It means you don't need to worry about it whatsoever. So that's probably going to be a pretty valid strategy, even just next week when we get another reset's worth of gear and the first stack of the raid buff. So keep that in mind if you're coming to this boss later on, especially if there's more nerfs to the Echo health specifically. Moving on here, again, it's just kind of bouncing between wherever these void tears spawn. We knew this was going to be the next void tear because this was the first one. It's kind of only the two options. And then we're going to get into the next set of collectors where, again, we are going to be playing a bit of goalie here. Knockbacks important. Triple dodges coming up. This is the scary one. So I will see. You see, I look here. I see my co-tank is over here. He's with the echo blocking. So I immediately pivot and block from this direction. Again, just trying to protect anyone who's over here and potentially can't see through the boss. So I'm popping defensive, soaking a couple, soaking this one. Probably didn't even need to soak that one, but that's kind of the goal of tanks on these fights, on these dangerous soak sets where there's a lot of different collector orbs coming out from multiple different directions. Try and soak any that may be hard for other players to see. Again, immunes can also do this. Like if you're not having your hunter or your rogue or something immune soak in the second set, they can use cloak on this set. They can use turtle on this set, or the first set after the intermission is also another scary one. So they can do that as well. This is going to be the silence overlap, I believe, where the debuffs go out and then the void tear goes out. So people get assigned to both here. They need to be very careful. Watch these pools. Again, this was where kind of a banned positioning there. Don't want to do that. But it ends up being okay. Also for positioning, note that you will see me sometimes move into these void tears very briefly just to get proper boss positioning. Tanks can do that, so keep that in mind. And again, it's all about lockdown for these manifestations. You're seeing their health absolutely melt. This is after the like 30% health nerf they had, so be aware that you don't need nearly as much AoE damage or lockdown effects on them. Knockback going out, some slow going out here. They're going to get stunned under the boss. And again, the priority as the tank here is to keep the boss on top of them at all times to maximize both boss damage and effective cleave as well. This one was bad. So this is a perfect example of why you need to pixel stack, by the way. So look at our ad droppers here. They're all kind of spread out in a line. They need to be stacked up. And you're going to see this one get knocked out. And this is exactly what happens when you are not stacked up. This one misses the void zone. And I believe our DK saves it here with a grip. We had another knock there as well, and that is why it is good to have backups. This was literally our kill pull. It just would not have happened if we did not have a backup player ready to get that manifestation, and all of this could have been prevented by a tighter stack. So be aware that that is the thing that is going to wipe you the most, is not having a tight enough stack or having your knockback player not hitting at the right angle, and either of that could cause the manifestations to miss, and if they ever get to their collector, it's an instant wipe. Now, here's this transition into the intermission. This is very dangerous. This knockback hit deals a ton of damage. You can also see the collectors are picking on random players right now as that is happening. So you need to be careful. If you are someone that gets picked on by the random target damage from the collectors during that knockback cast, you are scared. Be prepared to use a health pot. Be prepared to use a personal if you really need to on that, because it's very easy to get wombo comboed by those things. Moving to the intermission, we need to finish off these manifestations quickly, and then everyone goes to their assigned positions here. One thing, the collector energy is not static. It is random which one is going to be gaining energy first. So we see here it is square. We can mark them, so we kind of knew position and then it matched the floor marker. So square is our entrance one here, for example. And so how this works tank-wise, tank positioning-wise, is that my co-tank who has the echo, he always went to the entrance here. And then I would cover whichever of X or Moon started gaining energy first. And basically the plan here, and I can use maybe the raid plan as an example, right? Is let's say X started gaining energy first, this one up here. I would go here first. I would let my ad get stunned by the full energy cast. And then my co-tank would go to whichever one started getting second energy. If that was the one at the entrance, great, he would stay there. If that was the one over here, he would move over here with his ad once he picked it up. I would go then straight to him after my ad got stunned. We would taunt swap our ads, so to reset their stacks. I would stay here with his ad that is about to get stunned. He would taunt my ad when it started running over after its stun had finished, and he would go to the third collector that's gained energy. Then once his initial ad, and now the ad I am tanking, lost its stun because it had been stunned by this one, I move back to the first one because it would have gained more energy again and would be almost casting again for a second time. You'll block that second one, and then you would shortly phase into the damage amp after that. If your damage is high, you actually might skip this second cast from the initial energy gaining collector, but it can be good to position accordingly. Other thing to keep in mind, it doesn't actually matter who is tanking the echo. Just if they are tanking the echo, you do not really want to cross the entrance too much because you will amp the echo's damage from the empowerment since the boss is technically up here. Also, if your echo is still alive when you're going into that damage amp phase, make sure you tank them off to the side and you don't drag the echo on top of the boss to give a DR during the damage amp phase. That is definitely not ideal. And it's just essentially a tank dance. You're doing the same things every intermission. It's just in a different order of which collector is the ones you go to first, second, third. So something to keep in mind. There is some adjustment on the fly here in terms of tank positioning. Now, in terms of the actual intermission itself, the goal here is to basically kill it before you get to like 9 stacks of this ramping dot. Again, you'll likely, if you're doing that, get the second cast from the, in this case, the square collector will cast a second time because it casts first. And that was kind of our timing. But with more damage, you might be able to skip that. You might be able to do it at like, 7 stacks instead. That would be ideal. But because it's ramping damage, you want to make sure that you have cooldowns covering the back half of it. So you see here, I have the late rally call, which I hold a little bit. I basically send it as we get 6 stacks here of the dot to have it cover the later stages of this phase. Same thing with like personals, same things with like health pots or health stones. And on that note as well, in the second intermission, when you get there, if you have health pots, if you have personals, if you have health stones available to you, you want to make sure you are using them all in that second intermission to make it as safe as possible, because you do not need them in the last phase. So the place you are most likely to lose players to things like healing, to damage intake, is this phase. Now, just rewinding again so we can see it again. Some things important to note. One, if you can, try and bait these frontals, if you're the people at these pylons, to the outside edge. You will see they will try and target players at other pylons, so don't get hit from behind here. Be aware you can get targeted from other collectors. The other thing here, the movement is not nearly as bad because this was, again, post-nerf. You have an extra second, essentially, to dodge these lines, so make sure you do kind of tunnel dodging those lines. Otherwise, you can generally watch collector health, but you have such a long grace period at 10 seconds. That's actually not a huge deal. If one pylon is a little bit ahead, like in this case, we will call and be like, hey, Moon's a little bit behind here, but generally we want to keep chunking along here, get these collectors down in a decent time frame, because we really want to have this done before we get to our 9th stack. Like I think we're gonna beat the 8th stack here potentially, or just barely get our 8th stack, which is a good timing. That's kind of what we're aiming for in general here. And then of course damage amp goes out. I'll pop big defensives here because my co-tank still had the collector, and I'm going to have both the attendants real quick, but they get melted pretty quick into this damage amp. We are going to be lusting the second damage amp of this fight because it's in execute. I think it lines up better with cooldowns because it's, this is a burn at like 330 in the fight. So that's kind of our lust timing. This second actual boss phase, essentially the exact same as the first one, except you start out with a triple collector going off here. So again, I'm watching the middle of the room here. It turns out that my side really didn't have much, so we probably wanted a tank on the other side as well, which I'm not sure we had. So tanks can kind of cover 2 sides here to make it easier to dodge. Other thing as well, so you can kind of play the outside to make it a little easier on positioning and have the raid play a little bit towards here. That could also be better. As you see, we did lose someone there to those orbs going out. So whatever you can do to make that a little bit safer. And that is a spot too where, like I said, a lot of times immunities like Turtle or Cloak are assigned to also clear one of the collectors that the 2 tanks can't cover themselves. Same deal with the ad here. Like I said, we have our first set of soakers going back again, but anyone can do that. No one has debuffs at this point. We got raid cooldowns assigned to that. We're shifting over to these collectors based on how they spawn. This phase is a lot shorter than the first ones. You can see it's only a couple ad sets, I think like 3 or something, and then a knockback happens again. And then you go back to the intermission. There's really nothing to talk about there for those phases. They're literally a repeat copy paste of what I just mentioned. So I'm going to fast forward here to the end. As you can see, the Echo does have health. I'm going to taunt the other attendant in to reset my co-tank stacks. I'm going to pop defensives here because mine is getting pretty high stacks. And we're going to clear everything down. You can see how low the boss gets now with the health nerfs and the gear gain. Dark Terminus is a big knock. Make sure you do get knocked towards the back of the room here and not the entrance. Boom, knock goes out. And our goal here is to play inside this little cubby here we have marked. The blood decay is going to taunt here to kind of hold the boss easier. And you just want to dump these ads in the corner and then use our lockdowns to keep them there, essentially, right? We're going to rotate through Binding Shot. I'm going to like Piercing Howl. We have a Ring of Peace as well. We're going to Death Grip and add in. That kind of thing. As much as we can, I'll throw my spear basically as soon as it's on cooldown. It lines up with the second Bond of Manifestations, and just to burn the boss here ASAP. And as you can see, post nerfs, this phase does not last very long. It lasts shortly after the first knock, so be aware of that. If you aren't someone with a big mobility ability, make sure you have something ready for that knockback specifically. But it's basically just a burn boss here before you get absolutely owned by these ads going in. And usually, because you have so much CC already spec'd into it because of the first two phases, you definitely have enough CC to lock down these two sets of ads. There we have it, guys. Hopefully this video helps your group get FORGEWEAVER down. If it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Mythic guides in Manaforge Omega. Of course, none of these guides would be possible without the support of my amazing Patreon, so shout out to you guys. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.